generations to come.
And welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News and also the co-host of the Down the Stretch radio show on Saturday mornings on Sirius Radio.
How y'all doing? I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports and also my side gig on the Buyer Speed Figure team.
TD Thornton here, stablemate of Bills at Thoroughbred Daily News.
All right, guys. Well, the main action on the racetrack did not necessarily take place in the U.S. this weekend. It took place in the U.K. at Royal Ascot. And I know we were all looking forward to it. We previewed it last week. Randy, I thought the biggest story, obviously, was Auguste Rodin winning again in the Prince of Wales. Same race, Innsbruck didn't run very well at all. But what was definitely made it even more interesting was after it was over, Aidan O'Brien brought up the subject of this horse possibly coming for the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I imagine he figures that, well, first of all, he said the horse worked really well on the dirt last year when getting ready for the Breeders' Cup turf. And that gave him an indication that he could certainly handle the dirt. Boy, that would make it for a fun Breeders' Cup Classic if he were to come over.
They've tried to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. And oh my gosh, they've come close several times. But this is a horse that when he galloped in preparation for the Breeders' Cup turf last year, when he galloped on the dirt, O'Brien commented at the time and again now about how smoothly his action was over the dirt. And for this particular race, he was obviously trying to bounce back from a very disappointing performance. He's been kind of an enigmatic sort of horse. He has a 2-year-old as well, or at the beginning of his 3-year-old year, actually. And so they made the determination before this last race at Royal Ascot to be a little more aggressive with him during the early part of the race, to put him into the race a little bit more and not lag well back in the pack like he had been running previously, like he did in the Breeders' Cup Turf last year. And that seemed to work pretty well. That seemed to do the trick. And it also gave the boys at Coolmore a little more confidence that if they do decide to try the dirt in the Breeders' Cup Classic, where he obviously will have to be ridden a bit more aggressively in the early stages, that he can handle that and that he might even prefer that. As far as Inspiral, she did hesitate a bit at the start, but not so dramatically that you wouldn't think she had no chance. Even considering that, she ran well off her normal form. So it'll be interesting to see if John Gosden can get her back on track before the Breeders' Cup this fall.
And with regard to Auguste Rodin, not only were they trying to put him into the race a little earlier, they're trying to also maintain that fine line of Aidan O'Brien had said he does have a tendency to wait on horses a little bit when he makes the lead. So you have to pop the move exactly correctly. And he certainly did it last week.
And it was a fantastic Royal Ascot, by the way, for Coolmore, for Aidan O'Brien, for Ryan Moore, who once again, I mean, they probably, 12 to 15 times, I think, they've all been the champions at Royal Ascot. At the end of every 5-day Royal Ascot meet, they crown the owner, trainer, rider that had the most success. And those guys point for Royal Ascot, and they had a fantastic 5 days again this year.
Well, Randy, one person that was not a rousing success at Ascot was Wesley Ward. And obviously every year he's going to bring over what you think is the best team of horses to come from America. He brought 4 all 2-year-olds this year. And this is where they finished 10th, 20th, 16th, and 24th. And Randy, I'll give you credit. Take a bow. You said last week on the show you didn't think these Ward horses were nearly as good as some of the others he's brought over to Royal Ascot in recent years. Well, first of all, why did you think that? And then how about the end results?
Well, I mean, going way back, to Lady Aurelia and even before, and some horses since, like Crimson Advocate and some others. When Wesley gets them going in this country as 2-year-olds, it's typically at Keeneland in those 4.5 furlong baby races. Sometimes recently at Gulfstream Park in those 5 furlong turf sprints that are they give horses a free pass into Royal Ascot. And we're accustomed to seeing the Wesley Ward horses, some of them just be, eye-catching and win by large margins and run 4.5 furlongs in fast times and look like, wow, I mean, these horses could be anything. This year, not so much. I mean, the horses that he sent to Royal Ascot this year, if one of them won by a pretty good margin at Keeneland, but ran against extremely weak competition and ran in slow time, none of them really gave you that sort of wow that Wesley Ward's horses had done in the past. And even some of those wow horses didn't run very well at Royal Ascot when they were faced against, the tough competition that you see in those mega fields of 2-year-olds that you have to run against. So I just didn't think it added up to success this year for Wesley Ward. But he loves Royal Ascot. He's always going to try with his best 2-year-olds. And, he's been the benchmark for American participation over there.
And Wesley even was on the record himself as saying he was kind of introspective about, he's tailed off quite a bit here. Perhaps it's a regression to the mean. But he did point out when he first, about 15 years ago, had the horsepower to go over there, it also coincided with a time when there wasn't as much rain prior to the Ascot meet. The track was drier, a little harder, a little more conducive to those speed horses. And that hasn't always been the case in the past couple of years.
The one horse from the U.S. that didn't disappoint was Gabaldon, who ran second in the Windsor Castle, one of the major 2-year-old races, and trained by a really, I think, up-and-coming trainer, Jose Delgado. And he had won one of those Royal Palm preps at Gulfstream, had won the male division, came in, ran a really good race. That was the type of thing to me, if I'm the trainer or owner, sure, I feel bad about getting beat. Got beat second by a length, but at the same time, I just am overjoyed that the horse ran as well as he did.
Yeah, those races have been pretty effective. There's not a lot of sample size. The Royal Palm has been in existence for that long, the filly and the colt races, but they've done a pretty good job as far as sending horses to Royal Ascot that have been competitive. Look, for handicappers, for bettors, it's just so tough to figure out which of the horses from the United States will be able to succeed at Royal Ascot. We'll see their form transfer effectively. Sometimes you get horses that don't run all that fast here that go over there and seem to relish it. And then like some of those Wesley Ward horses in the past, that have won in the equivalent of a Beyer speed figure of 90 or close to it, will go over there and not run very well. It's really, really hard to figure out. But that horse ran a very strong race
in a 27 horse field. And this is Gabaldon is a $9,000 yearling. So he would not be one of those horses that you would have projected to be even competing at Royal Ascot, let alone finishing on the board.
So, Randy, I touched on a lot of subjects. What else at Royal Ascot caught your attention during the fabulous 5-day meet?
Yeah, a couple of the other headlines, an American-owned horse by the name of Porta Fortuna, who was just narrowly beaten in the juvenile fillies turf by Hard to Justify last year, won the Group 1 Coronation Stakes and did it in pretty eye-catching fashion, trained by Donica O'Brien. And because of the American ownership, she is already being pointed to come back to run in the Breeders' Cup this fall. There's another mare from Australia by the name of Asfoora, who won the race that used to be called the King's Stand, the 5-furlong sprint race. Now it's the King Charles. That was a Breeders' Cup Challenge race, and her connections, when they found out the Breeders' Cup this year is at Del Mar, and they've heard so many good things about Del Mar, they've already been on the record as saying that if Asfoora continues to run well this summer and this fall, the Breeders' Cup will definitely be in their plans. And another one to watch, it's another Coolmore, Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore horse, who won the Chesham Stakes on Saturday for 2-year-old fillies, a filly by the name of Bedtime Story, right? Won that race by 9.5 lengths. And as we've seen in the past, anytime Coolmore and Aidan O'Brien have a very fast 2-year-old filly, even 2-year-old colts, the Breeders' Cup seems to almost always be at least in consideration if she continues to do well.
TD, anything to add to that?
I think Randy summed it up pretty well.
All right, very good. Well, thanks for that, Randy, and a great week at Royal Ascot. And we look forward to Auguste Rodin coming in and racing in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Hopefully that is where he'll wind up. TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. Congratulations to the connections of Shareholder, winner of the Group 2 Norfolk Stakes Thursday at Royal Ascot. Shareholder was bred in Kentucky and was a $62,000 graduate of last September's Keeneland sale. Make plans to attend this fall's Keeneland September sale starting September 9th. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
At Keeneland, a horse will always be measured in hands. Hands that see, that sense, that speak. Hands that hold our sport to a higher standard. Not for our sake, but for theirs. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
This week, the fastest horse of the week is brought to you by Global Campaign, one of the fast sires at WinStar Farm. Global Campaign had another winner on Friday, his second, when 2-year-old filly Warming looked pretty good, winning a 6-furlong, $90,000 maiden special weight on the turf at Aqueduct. That was her career debut, and Warming won that race by 2 3/4 lengths. Global Campaign, of course, is a racehorse. Not only won the Grade 1 Woodward Stakes, just like his sire Curlin, with a 104 buyer, but he's a half-brother to Bolt Doro, the champion first crop stallion of 2022. Global Campaign, the Woodward winner, stands at WinStar Farm for a fee of $12,500. Fastest horse of the week ran on Saturday at Churchill Downs in the Chicago Stakes. Her name is Vava, and she's got to be considered an early contender for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. Vava won the Chicago as a 2-5 favorite. It was just a 5-horse field by a length and a quarter, but that was her 5th win in her last 6 races, all at the 7-furlong distance of the Filly and Mare Sprint. The only defeat was a half-length loss to Alva Star in the Madison Stakes at Keeneland that she subsequently avenged at Churchill Downs. Vava's buyer speed figure in the Chicago, a week high 99. The fastest horse of the week, Vava, owned by Belladonna Racing and Lynn Hudson, trained by Cherie DeVoe. She was ridden by Irad Ortiz. As always, our Guest of the Week segment on the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by the Green Group, tax consulting and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry.
Now we're joined by our Green Group Guest of the Week. It's one of the hottest jockeys on the globe, Flavien Prat. Flavien, thanks so much for joining us. And first question I have for you is about the 3-year-olds, which we're going to be talking a lot today, and the new shooter. You rode him for Chad Brown in an allowance victory Saturday at Aqueduct. He won very easily for the 2nd straight time. What do you like about him? What is his future?
What I like about him, he's running fast. No, he has done everything right. He was before his first race. Everybody liked him, and he was training well going into his first race. He ran well and came back even better, and then run a good race in Aqueduct.
Follow-up question for you on that. It was interesting. That was the same day that Catching Freedom ran as the favorite in the Ohio Derby. You had been riding him. What were the circumstances? Did you actually choose to stay in New York to ride Ultimate Wisdom, or was there more to the story than that?
No, yeah, it was one of those situations where it was either I was going to the Ohio Derby, or I was staying in New York and give a chance to see what Unmatched Wisdom could do. And I don't know, I just felt like I was going to try to see what Unmatched Wisdom could do, and he ran a good race, so I was very pleased with that.
So, Flav, before we dive into some of the other stuff, let's keep it with the 3-year-olds and talk Sierra Leone for a second. Okay, going into the Belmont, everybody knew about his lugging in situation, his habits, the bit change and things like that. And watching the Belmont Stakes, at one point, like at about the 3/8 pole, maybe I'm like, my God, he's going to get beat 20 lengths. He's going absolutely nowhere. And then all of a sudden, belatedly, here he comes. What were your thoughts on the kind of race that he ran in the Belmont Stakes?
Well, I had pretty much the same thought as you. It seems like that day the track was pretty fast, and it was very hard to make ground. was not traveling at all down the backside. I couldn't, it felt like the first quarter was quick, and I was okay where I was, and I was trying to, get him into a rhythm, and I figured once I get down the backside, I'll pick up a few horses, and as it goes, you'll start building momentum. But that was not the case. He was struggling to get some momentum, and he finally turning form. He finally made a good run. So it was not as expected, but at the last part of the race was good, and so hopefully we can build something up for the future.
He's obviously got a huge amount of talent locked in there. So I mean, what's the solution? Not that he's running poorly. Is it just going to be maturity? I mean, what else can be done at this point?
Well, I think, like I said, I don't think the track suited him that day. I don't feel like he was very comfortable on the track. So hopefully, he'll go back to Saratoga. Usually in the summer, the track is a bit slower, and we'll go from there. I mean, see what happens.
Have you spoken to Chad Brown about a commitment for the ride back? Are you going to be riding him back in the Jim Dandy or Travers, or has that yet to be decided?
I don't know what Chad is going to do with him, and but obviously he has a few options, and I'm sure I'll pick the right one.
Flavien, I want to switch subjects for a minute, but it's something that's so interesting to me. I want you to talk to us and give us a feeling of what it's like to ride Flightline. And how does that feeling aboard him feel different than virtually any other horse you've ever ridden?
Very small individual. It's very strange. It felt like he knew he was the star. He was obviously very fast, and could carry the speed for forever. I mean, for a mile and a quarter at least. So, he was very powerful. He had a great way of moving, well balanced, and he was very good in the turns. It felt like when he hit the turn, it was, for whatever reason, I never moved on him on the turn, but for whatever reason, every time he swapped lead, he would pick up a length or two on everybody else. Yeah.
And what was going through your mind in the Pacific Classic when you almost did a Ron Turcotte on Secretariat, where it looked like you looked behind you and almost couldn't believe that he was so far in front? Was that your reaction at the time?
It was if I recall, he ran the 8 mile, and we're going from a mile to a mile and a quarter. He was running, I think, Country Grammar at the time. He was running against in the Classic. So, I felt that Country Grammar, could maybe make a run on us. So I'm down the backside, and we get to the turn. So from there, I kind of let him run, and then took a peek behind and realized that all of a sudden we 20 lengths in front. So it was shocking. It was a very good feeling.
Well, without Flightline, Flavien, you've certainly kept the ball rolling. I mean, we're taping this on June 25th. Right now, you've made just a touch under $13.4 million in purse money. That's a record for your career at this stage of any year. You're practically riding First Call for Chad Brown. You're in the Charlie Appleby barn. You're riding the best horse in the Bob Baffert barn. You're in with Brad Cox. I mean, things seemingly couldn't be going better. And I know in 2022, when you made the decision to relocate from Southern California to New York and Kentucky, it raised a lot of eyebrows. Looking back on that decision now, what do you think about it?
I mean, gratefully, as you say, I'm riding for great connection. Very fortunate. My agent's doing a great job, and so everything is going well right now. I thought it felt like it was the right move at the right time. It was a time where I was in California for probably 6 or 7 years. And it just felt like it was time to, try to do something else and explore a little bit the East Coast. And I had the opportunity to ride for some trainer on the East Coast. And So yeah, I thought it was just the right time to do it.
That did seem like a very natural progression for you, Flavien. Let's maybe roll the clock back a little further. You started riding at age 16 in your home country of France. You were a champion apprentice the year later, and you only began riding in winters in Southern California in around 2009. And we look at the way your career has taken off and just blasted off since then. What do you know now with the experience that you've gained here in North America that you wish you knew when you were starting out? That was quite a bold move to be able to switch your tack from France to Southern California. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Well, that's a good question. No, I was when I was riding in France, everything happened very quickly. So I rode the first, I think, the last 3 or 4 months of the season, and then I had a full season as an apprentice, and I was so best apprentice. But it happened very quickly. I was very young. I don't think I was ready for that. I was putting in position where a lot was expecting from me, and I don't think I was ready for that. But it was good because then I went to smaller racetrack. I was riding less quality horses, and I had to fight. I had earn my way, and it was hard, but it was a good thing because then I came here and I was starving, and it was I wanted to do well, and I think at that time then I was ready to do better.
Flavien, you have won a Kentucky Derby, of course, officially 2019 with Country House. But I've read that you really don't look at it that way, that it's sort of what we would call a hollow victory, of course, because he was put up through disqualifications. Do you feel that you're a Kentucky Derby winner already, or do you feel I still need to get my first real Derby win?
Well, I did win the Kentucky Derby, but obviously not in. I mean, it's not how you want to win it. Like you don't cross the finish line first and all that thing. And hopefully, I would be very fortunate if we can do that again. But regardless, yeah, I won the Kentucky Derby.
One of the things that we horse players have noticed, Flavien, is that more than you would expect, I think, for riders coming from Europe, particularly from France, you and in particular also Florent Giroux have mastered the art in this country of being aggressive early in races when the situation calls for it. How long did it take you to adjust that way to American racing, and do you see that as an advantage?
I don't know how long, and I probably still, I'm still learning anyway. But it's I came here and I didn't want to have that tag of a tough rider. That was a main. I didn't want that. I love dirt races. I think I'm a big fan of dirt races, and I didn't want to have that tag. So I did everything to make sure I was able to perform on the dirt. And obviously dirt races, you need to be aggressive at some point, and you need to put yourself in a good position, going into the first turn. It's something that I always try to improve, that's for sure.
Flavien, as you continue to learn, you said you're always learning. Take a look back at the earlier stages of your career when you were trying to cement those habits and get them part of your routine and your makeup. Who was a jockey that was a great influence on you, and maybe what was the best piece of advice you ever got from a veteran rider?
I don't think there was one, run rider that I picked, but obviously, you look at the when I was in California, obviously Mike Smith, it's one of the riders that has one of the best palmarès, and it was somebody that I like to look at, and very easy to talk to, and can give you advice. But no, there's been a lot of rider that I watch, and but I'm not. There's not one in particular.
Flavien, it's interesting to me that, and maybe people don't all know this, going way back in your career, you're the son of, and from a family of standardbred trotting trainers. And that was where you originally stood out. Two-part question. Why'd you make the switch to thoroughbreds? And did you ever dream of winning the Prix de l'Amérique more so than the Kentucky Derby?
No, so I love trotters. That's I've been around trotters all my as a kid, but I was very small, very light, and I felt like it could be a good. I always liked thoroughbred as a kid, and I thought if I can make it as a thoroughbred rider, I would like to try. And so before I went to the school, the jockey school, I went to 2 different trainers, and I spent 2 weeks with each, just to make sure I like it, and I did. And so then after that, I went to the jockey school, and that's about it. I just didn't want the harness business. It's a lot family related. A lot of people work with their parents and all that thing, and I just want to do my own thing. I want to do something different, and be able to do my own thing.
Well, since things are going so well for you right now, Flavien, if you're ever tempted to ride in a charity harness race, ask around about what happened to Lafitte Pincay when he did that 34 years ago in 1990 and got thrown into the air like a rag doll and wound up breaking his collarbone and all sorts of other injuries. Be careful if you ever decide to do that.
I heard the story, but actually I did it last year in Saratoga. But I think Lafitte, when he drove a pacer, and they have their 4 legs tied up. So I don't do that. I'll just stay with the harness, the trotters.
Flavien, you're riding right now at a very competitive time as far as the North American jockey colony is concerned, and you're riding in New York, also spending some time shipping out to bigger races at other prominent tracks, wherever the Grade 1 races are. Talk to us a little bit about your fellow riders, your rivals, your friends. Who is the one jockey that when you're going down, setting down a horse in the stretch, you don't want to either see coming after you, or you don't want to see that you have to reel in? Somebody.
No, I think, as you said, there's a very good group of riders right now. And I mean, when you ride a race and you have Johnny Velasquez, Javier Castellano, you got the Ortiz brother, Tyler Gaff. I mean, there's like so many good riders. But it's fun. I think it makes all of us better, and it's fun to ride with all those great riders.
All right. We want to thank Flavien Prat. A great interview. Congratulations on all your recent success, Flavien. And boy, it's going to be a fun Saratoga with you battling it out with so many great riders, including Frankie Dettori. So Flavien, we'll catch up with you again soon. Congratulations on all this year's success, and thanks for spending some time with us here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.
As the Green Group Guest of the Week, Flavien Prat will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation from Lynn Green et al. At the Green Group, who over the years has saved a lot of money on the tax bills, especially of those who participate, like Flavien, in the thoroughbred industry. To find out more about how the Green Group can assist you when it comes to tax time, just log on to greenco.com.
When it comes to the horse industry, tax laws are complicated and unique. That is why most people overpay on their taxes. Why not get a second opinion from the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the thoroughbred industry? With over 800 clients in the horse business alone, the Green Group has the expertise to save you taxes. There is a reason the most successful owners, breeders, trainers, vets, and horsemen use the Green Group as their tax advisors. We save you taxes. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with current-edge tax-saving strategies, produces positive tax-saving results for clients. Take advantage of this special offer. The Green Group will give you a complimentary and confidential review of your tax return. Contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com.
So the racing over the weekend, this is kind of one of the dullest periods actually of the year, the post-Belmont, pre-Saratoga, Del Mar period. You don't get a whole lot of action, but the Ohio Derby won last year by Randy Moss's all-time favorite horse, Two Phils, did give us something to talk about at Thistledown. By the way, the first racetrack I ever went to in my life, and I was 6 years old, Thistledown, when I was actually born in Cleveland, guys, if you didn't know that. But many, many years later, Bill Mott comes in with a horse by the name of Batten Down. And on paper, it looked like this race was ripe for somebody to steal it on the front end. Catching Freedom was the huge favorite, and he really didn't have it. Batten Down went right to the front, and actually the first quarter was pretty fast, 22 and change. So it's not like he was able to sleepwalk on the lead. So, I would probably make the same comment about any Ohio Derby winner as I'm going to say about him. Yeah, he looked good, but who did he beat? And can he? I don't think Bill Mott has said anything about where his next stop is, but you would think he would be looking at the Haskell, Travers, Jim Dandy. But I think when he gets into deeper waters, probably will not emerge as one of the top 3-year-olds. But he's very well bred, as a great trainer. You never know.
He did go very fast early, and he went slow late. The final quarter of that race, the fourth quarter of that race, rather, was a hair over 26 seconds. And he matched speed figures. He ran a 93 in his first maiden win over 1.25 miles at Churchill, came back with the same number. But I concur with you, Bill, that I'd have to say I can't say whether he's probably moved forward in terms of his own progression. However, I can't say where he stacks up against the rest of the crop at this point.
Yeah, I totally dropped the ball. I don't know what it was raining where I live on Saturday. I don't know what the hell I was doing, but I knew we were going to be talking about the Ohio Derby. So I thought, okay, I'll just log on. I'll watch the replay after the fact. I'll look at the past performances to get ready for the podcast and all that. And so Saturday evening, I logged on and and looked at the PPs first before I looked at who won the race. And then I looked at the race in the chart. I cannot believe that Catching Freedom was 2-5 and Batten Down was almost 7-2. It's mind-boggling. I would have made a pretty substantial wager, I think, on Batten Down if I had been paying any attention. I had my head out of my butt. Look, I mean, Catching Freedom is a confirmed closer. There was no speed in this race to compete with Batten Down. Batten Down had earned speed figures that were competitive to Catching Freedom. And you're running on the dirt, right? You've got a horse who's extremely well-bred in Batten Down, who is improving. You've got a horse who's going to control the pace. You got a horse who's trained by Bill Mott, ridden by Junior Alvarado. There was a lot to like about Batten Down, especially at 3-1 when Catching Freedom was 2-5. So I thought it was no surprise whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, you can't really think going forward that Batten Down, is going to be a Sierra Leone, Mystic Dan type horse. But boy, in this spot in the Ohio Derby, for a purse of, what was it? $500,000. Right? I mean, what a good spot for Batten Down. And you talk about the pedigree. Okay, Batten Down is a full brother to Tacitus, who made $3.7 million in his career. He was very difficult horse to figure out throughout his career, but he made a whole heck of a lot of money. Scylla, who's a 4-year-old filly right now, who is really running well and looks like she could be a factor in the distaff division. And, and now Batten Down, all three of them are by Tappet out of the mare Close Hatches, who herself won 5 Grade 1 races and $2.7 million. So one of these dirt pedigrees at Juddmonte Farm that's just absolutely spectacular. And there was just a lot to like about Batten Down, I thought, in the Ohio Derby.
Yeah. And, the favorite taking it on the chin in the Ohio Derby continues a trend that we've seen, counting the past 3 Triple Crown races and the 4 Road to the Kentucky Derby prep races that were run in April and 1 in March, we've now seen 6 of the last 7 of those races produce beaten favorites. And the 3 Triple Crown races were won by horses who were 18-1, 9-1, and 17-1. So it's tough to latch on to one particular horse heading into the second half of the season.
The other 3-year-old race of note over the weekend was not a stakes race, but an allowance race Saturday at Aqueduct, won by Unmatched Wisdom, a horse that had come in for Chad Brown, a 3-year-old, off a very impressive win in a maiden special weight race, got a big figure that day, comes back to the next level at the first level allowance race. I believe he was 1-5, which figured he ran like a 1-5 shot. He won quite easily for Chad Brown. And even though he's only won twice, he deserves now to be in the conversation as well. I talked to Chad yesterday trying to figure out where he's going to go with each of his horses. And the most likely spot for him is the Curlin Stakes. That's the one they run the day before the Jim Dandy that is has some sort of restrictions to it. So it's not an open stakes race, but obviously this horse would qualify. If he wins that, he can go in the Travers. He told me that he wouldn't mind running Sierra Leone against Unmatched Wisdom in the Travers if it came down to that. But then I get down, I had a nice back and forth on my radio show with Dave Grenning at the Daily Racing Forum. And he said, I'm not going to get excited yet about this horse until he beats somebody. And he made a good point. Here's a horse that has looked fantastic, but in this allowance race, I mean, he beat horses that were hopelessly overmatched. But I think he's a prospect. But again, I think Dave Grenning is right. He needs to prove it at a higher level.
Yeah, in his first start on May the 10th at Aqueduct, the horse got sick as a 2-year-old, which is why his debut was delayed. It was a pretty speed favoring kind of day that day. He got a 98 buyer, but the jury was still out just a little bit. 93 buyer last time on Saturday at Aqueduct, but it was at 1 mile and an eighth. I texted with Chad this morning. The Curlin is definitely, I think, where he's looking at right now. That's in 4 weeks. Then that'll give him 5 weeks between the Curlin and the Travers. Still kind of tossed up as to whether to run Sierra Leone in the Jim Dandy or just to wait for the Travers for him. So look, I mean, the horse he's got a decent pedigree, not spectacular. He's by Cairo Prince out of a Pure Prize mare. It's another Klarovich stable horse. He's a horse that runs near the front end, where Sierra Leone obviously is just the opposite. So you can kind of cover both your bases there. 1.25 miles looks like it won't be much of a problem. He's an interesting horse, an exciting horse to follow going forward.
So this is the time of year where we, now I think officially we are into the second half of the season. The summer is here. The Ohio Derby was the first graded stakes race for 3-year-olds during the summer. And, we can reevaluate the group and try. I think the thing to do now is, we know who won these previous races. Nobody is standing out from the crowd. Everybody's taking their turns. Who are going to be the horses that are going to excel in the second half and, perhaps cinch up that 3-year-old championship, or maybe even be one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup. So just the TDN did a good job over the last couple of days giving a rundown of where all these horses are going to run. Let me just go through that. As Randy just mentioned, Sierra Leone is either the Jim Dandy or the Travers. Torpedo Anna, knowing Kenny McPeak, he's going to do something bold here with the filly. She's going to go likely in the CCA Oaks next, but then the Travers would be possible. Ultimate Wisdom, as we said, likely. The Curlin Stakes, batten down, I have no idea. Mystic Dan, the Travers, then the Pennsylvania Derby. And how about this? Todd Pletcher has 2 very nice 3-year-olds in his barn in Fierceness, in Mind Frame. They are both being pointed to the Haskell, according to Todd Pletcher. I think he told that to the Naira Notes team. So it was looking to run both of them, which I was a little surprised. Why wouldn't you run one in the Jim Dandy and one in the Haskell, though he may still do that. Dornock has not had a workout yet after the Belmont. I have no idea where he's going. Sees the Gray has had his first work back just the other day. Have not heard where he's going. So TD, you can kick this off. When we're doing this podcast in the middle of November, who are we talking about as the best 3-year-old in the country?
I'm right now in June, I'm talking about the horse who I thought was the kingpin back in April when we were trying to decide whether a lawsuit would allow the Bob Baffert trainees to get into the Kentucky Derby. And I'm going to hang my hat on Muth. He was the morning line favorite for the Preakness. He had to scratch out of that race because of a fever. This is the winner of the Arkansas Derby, and he is being pointed for the Haskell. he checks a lot of boxes on my list: consistency, reliability. He's athletic. He has an all business way of going. He doesn't seem to be at the mercy of the pace. He makes his own breaks. He doesn't seem to be one of those horses who needs a certain trip to excel. At least he's extricated himself from some kind of dicey spots where he had to go up and after horses in the Arkansas Derby, for example, and still withheld some late closers there. I think he's the one to beat.
And you can watch the Haskell Stakes, by the way, on NBC Sports. What a race that's going to turn out to be, it looks like. And who knows what's going to happen with Nisos. I don't know. I haven't talked to Bob about Nisos lately. He hasn't breezed since February. But earlier this year, Bob was hoping to be able to get him back for the fall. And Baffert not unveiled, but he won another stakes race a couple of weeks ago, the Affirmed Stakes at Santa Anita, with a 3-year-old named Parenting, who drew off and won very impressively in a decent figure. So, Bob is loaded as well. But it is wide open now as we head into the second half of the year.
I've got to throw my weight behind Mindframe. And, let's remember the obstacles he had to overcome to run well in the Belmonts. The Belmont was his third lifetime start. I know the game has changed, and, 30, 40 years ago, the Belmont would have been his 9th or 10th lifetime start easily. And so you do get lightly raced horses in here, but the horse didn't have the experience, had never run anywhere close to the 1.25 mile distance. He finished second in a really good effort. It was very green, and I think might have won if, he didn't kind of zig and zag a little bit in the stretch. I got to expect a lot of improvement for him, and I want to see what he does going forward. And then, what about fierceness? Is he going to be? I mean, you have no idea what to do with this horse. See, it's always good race, bad race, good race. So he should be in a good race in the Haskell if that's where he goes. But, until this horse puts this odd pattern of him behind him, I can't get too excited about him. Then Mystic Dan, nobody's talking about him. Nothing wrong with him. I mean, he won the Derby and ran really well in the Preakness, and then didn't have the best showings in the Belmont Stakes, but he could really jump up in there. And also Torpedo Anno. If, there's one trainer in the country that will run her against the boys, it's Kenny McPeak. He loves to take bold shots. So I'm in some ways, I'm agreeing with you guys, just saying that, and saying that there's several candidates. It's very wide open, but, if I had to pick one, it's going to be Mindframe.
So let me roll out an interesting scenario and get your guys' opinion on this. Okay, so let's just suppose that for the rest of the year, heading into the Breeders' Cup Classic, nobody really jumps up and takes the 3-year-old male division by the neck, right? It's still wide open, and the Breeders' Cup Classic is going to determine who the 3-year-old champion will be. Okay, so now we get to Del Mar, and who wins the Breeders' Cup Classic by 2.5 lengths, but Forever Young from Japan, making his second start of the year in the United States after possibly being the best horse in the Kentucky Derby. Okay. Would you guys consider at that point, with 2 starts in the United States, making Forever Young the 3-year-old champion?
I would. I wouldn't. The 2 would make the big difference. I don't like voting for the European turf horses that come in and win the 1 race in the Breeders' Cup. But if he would, having had the 2 races, including, such a good performance in the Kentucky Derby, I mean, it's all hypothetical. We don't know.
Sure.
Maybe some horse will win the Haskell, Travers, and Pennsylvania Derby, though that's unlikely. But you bring up a really good point, Randy. I think under that scenario, I would vote for him for 3-year-old champion. But now, is he definitely coming back, and is he going to run anywhere else in between?
No, they're planning on running him in Japan at least once and maybe more. Okay. But the Breeders' Cup Classic is on their radar. Right. Yes.
There you go.
TD, would you vote for him?
It's funny that you should bring him up in that type of a scenario, because as I was preparing for the podcast, I was looking back at my marked up Kentucky Derby chart and going through the rundown notes that I made, and I was saying, well, who have I need a refresher here. Who have I been really looking forward to running back? One of them was Dornoch. Because I think he was totally out of his element in the Bluegrass Stakes, and he just got trouble tripped in the Derby unmercifully. And then I looked down the list and I said, well, Fierceness, he's been on my bet against list for quite some time. So I'm looking forward to him running again for the purposes of wagering against him. And I said, who else am I looking forward to running to seeing in action again? And Forever Young was really the only one that came up. I think that in that spot, he's got a legitimate chance. I don't get too caught up in who I would vote for because I don't participate in the voting for the championships, but he's got to be considered a major player if he comes over.
The TDN Writers Room brought to you by the PHBA, the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. There were 2 stakes races for PA-bred 3-year-olds on Monday night at Parks. Don't Look Back at All won the Power by Far Stakes under Irad Ortiz. He was 1-5. She was 1-5, bred by Steve Young's A1A Racing. And then Travesso won easily for his owner breeders, Greg and Caroline Bentley, and that was in the Crowd Pleaser Stakes. Both of those races were worth $100,000. So do you want to get in on some of that PA bred money? You've got only until June 30th to nominate your PA bred or PA sired 2-year-old to the PA sired series at the $1,000 nomination price. That'll make you eligible for the 3 sets of $100,000 stakes for 2-year-old colts and fillies, and also one for 3-year-olds. Here's what you do. You go to pabred.com, check out the featured section on the homepage, send in the nomination form with your $1,000 fee, postmarked by June 30th, and voila, you are in. Any questions? Contact the PA Bred office, 610-444-1050.
The state of Pennsylvania has the best breeders program in the entire United States.
When you buy a yearling, it's a little bit like buying a lottery ticket. And we are trying to provide a lottery ticket that the likelihood is to hit the jackpot.
Angel of Empire wins the Arkansas Derby and wins it clear.
Uncle Heavy late hits a photo finish.
Pennsylvania and the PHBA have the best state-bred program in the country, bar none.
The winner, Uncle Heavy. He's a 3-year-old bred in Pennsylvania.
So yesterday, Mr. Thornton had a lot of work to do because we got a decision out of the Supreme Court about HISA. Now, I've got a lot of things I want to say about this, but why don't we start this way? TD, you wrote the story. You understand this as well as anybody. Just give us the nuts and bolts of this first.
Okay. When you hear HISA and Supreme Court in the same sentence, obviously it's going to send off some alarm bells and people are going to flock to those type of stories. I will have to say it all gets confusing because of the many overlapping lawsuits that have been either contested or are still in play. I would have to preface my comments by saying this is not the ruling we were waiting for. This is the ruling that has to do with Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Louisiana, who already lost an appeals decision in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in the federal court system. And they wanted a second look at that. So their first option was to go to what's called an en banc hearing, which is they say to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, hey, the 3-judge panel said it's constitutional. We want the entire, I believe it's a 28-judge panel to reconsider it. The Sixth Circuit said, no, we're not going to do that. Their only other option and their only other recourse, and I can't blame them for taking it, was to say, hey, Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, will you take a look at this? And they made that request. They filed some documentation. The folks from HISA also filed their documentation, but there was never any oral arguments before the Supreme Court. It never reached that level. And the decision that came out on Monday, June 24th, was simply a one-liner amongst many other decisions in a format that's released once a month by the Supreme Court that said, no, this is a case we are not taking. They didn't issue a written ruling. They hadn't considered it the way that we think all of the judges get together and consider and write opinions. They just said, no, it's a no-go. So does that set a precedent at the Supreme Court level? In a way, it does. But the ruling that we're actually waiting for, that everybody has kind of been on pins and needles in the racing industry, whether you're for HISA or anti-HISA, is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And we've been waiting for that one since oral arguments got heard last October 4th. This is the lawsuit led by the HBPA and its affiliates and some other folks who are also have joined the lawsuit. It's been lingering in the court system for 3 years, since the spring of 2021. It is challenging HISA on constitutionality grounds. Initially, that lawsuit was filed in 2021. It was dismissed in 2022. The HBPA appealed that to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And in November of 22, that's when the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said, yes, HISA is unconstitutional. You are correct, HBPA. They sent, what happened was the enacting law that enables HISA got sent back to Congress. That in December of 2022 was when Congress gave it a 1 or 2 line tweak. President Biden signed it. It's been in action ever since, except in the states, the several states where there is a stay preventing it from going into effect. But that's been the law of the land nationwide since then. So what happened when that new law got written, the HBPA came back and said, well, we want to appeal that again. And that is what has been argued before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Again, it's been lingering for almost 9 months now, since last October. It's a little overdue for the decision, but you don't tell a federal court of appeals what their timetable is, but it is a little bit longer than we might have expected. I think a lot of people were expecting a ruling by the end of 2023. It didn't happen. We're still waiting. Now, why is that important? Because if that ruling comes back out and says, no, the rewrite in December of 2022 did not fix the alleged constitutional defects, that is going to be what sets up the Fifth Circuit saying, no, it's not constitutional. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals is already on record as saying it is constitutional. And that, to bring kind of a long-winded end to this explanation, is when the Supreme Court would very likely get interested in somebody escalating it up to that level, because you would then have 2 federal appeals courts with conflicting opinions. We don't have that right now. We didn't have that when the 3 states, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Louisiana, asked the Supreme Court to hear it. So I'm not surprised it got shot down.
TD, wouldn't you think, though, and I know what you're saying about the Fifth Circuit, that's still going to be the most important story, but, wouldn't the judges on that court be influenced by the Supreme Court, basically not ruling one way or another, but says we don't even care about it, it's not going to bother. They wouldn't exactly be going against the Supreme Court, but the message was loud and clear. Do you think the Fifth Circuit judges will look at this and consider that when they make their ruling?
And would one reason why there was such a delay in the Fifth Circuit Court's action on this, could that possibly be because they knew that the Sixth Circuit Court appeal to the Supreme Court was in the offing, and they wanted to purposely wait to see whether the Supreme Court took it up or not?
Those are both valid points in my opinion, and I think they're obligated to factor that into their decision.
Well, the only other thing I would say, I hope this is almost over with the court challenges. It's just, chewed up so much time and exhausted, resources, mental resources, financial resources, et cetera. And, I have a lot of mixed feelings about HISA. The thing that my biggest problem with them is, these drug positives for people that obviously didn't do anything wrong, and they have, the little rinky-dink positives. But something that came out of this and was even mentioned in the in the press release put out by HISA after the court decision, or the Supreme Court's non-decision, actually, you get back to this number that they have reduced equine fatalities, and they're not solely responsible for this, but under HISA, equine fatalities are down 38% in the first quarter. If anything else, that's the reason why you should be for HISA, because there's now numbers that show that they are making the game safer. And, I hope all these other states, which all happen to be blue states, this is, not unlike our own politics, everything else in the country. It's red versus blue. It's conservatives versus, moderates and liberals and whatnot. But I would hope that at some point all these people would just throw in the towel, say we can't win this thing, and then just, let's go forward. And, we don't like the law, but we're going to do the best we can by it.
Before HISA came into effect, one of the big criticisms about it was from trainers and owners who felt that they would be sort of imperious and they would try to be heavy-handed in many of their rulings, and they wouldn't listen to common sense. They wouldn't go back and repair some of their mistakes, that they would create havoc. And I think one thing that we've seen in HISA's credit is that when things don't seem to be working, such as the metformin situation right now, but there have been numerous others, they have been very willing to listen and to make adjustments and tweaks along the way that have improved the process. And I think when we saw what happened in Louisiana recently, I think HISA had a lot to do, along with Churchill Downs Incorporated, with steering the ship in Louisiana and the Louisiana Racing Commission in the right direction.
That, of course, when the Louisiana Racing Commission wanted to make just about everything legal. Do whatever you want. Give them clenbuterol, give them rocket fuel, give them, anything goes, which is probably about the worst idea in the history of horse racing. TD, anything else on the subject?
No, I concur with a lot of what you guys said. And HISA is being, I think, more responsive than a lot of people thought they would be. However, there has been a fair amount of collateral damage on the way, and there doesn't seem to be anything happening to redress some people's careers who've been upended, and their lives have been really knocked out of whack, not for the better. So I don't know what they can do. I don't propose an answer, but there has been a fair amount of collateral damage along the way.
No doubt about it. Hey guys, I was handicapping the weekend races, and I was going over the Laurel card for my TV show, and from a radio show. And the feature race on Laurel on Saturday had a 3-horse field. And it was in a dirt race, of course. And, so you look at that and you look at the situation. And right now I counted 8 tracks within about 400 miles of one another, all running against one another. Presque Isle, Penn National, Charlestown, Monmouth, Laurel, Colonial, Delaware Park, and Parks. There's no horses out there. There's simply not enough horses to go around to fill this glut of racing that is involved with the Mid-Atlantic Circuit. And it's something you don't hear a lot of talk about this anymore. It used to be a much more important factor in horse racing, and that is that you have circuits. And matter of fact, there used to be a Delaware Park, Maryland circuit. Then later on, there was a Laurel Park / Pimlico Colonial Downs circuit. And I'm sorry, a Colonial Downs is in the mix. They opened July 11th with a meet now that is very, very strong. $60,000 maidens. They have the August 10th Arlington Million. But I just wish somebody would, can somebody look at this? And to me, I think Laurel is the track. And they might do it because they're going to soon be under new management of the Maryland, whatever the heck they called that thing. But it's time for Laurel, and I'm not just picking on them, but you had a 3-horse field for your feature race. Can you just take off the summer and build up a circuit? Free shipping down to Delaware Park for all our horsemen. We'll run Maryland bred races at Delaware Park so that those guys don't get a bad deal. This is one of the biggest problems facing racing, and this is nothing new, but the short fields and there's too much racing. Nobody seems to want to do anything about it.
I think one of the things that goes in conjunction with that is when Laurel's turf course opened in 2005, the new and expanded turf course, 142 feet wide, 6 different rail positions. It was billed as a game changer for Maryland racing. And in a lot of ways, it was. It became more of a grass-centric destination state for trainers. It boosted field sizes. It boosted handle, which in turn, of course, boosts purses. Now with Pimlico, once we have this changeover where, yes, Laurel's going to host racing while the Pimlico Plus project gets built. But at some point in the middle term, Pimlico is going to be the only game in town in Maryland racing. Their existing turf course is 7 furlongs and 70 feet wide. And from my understanding, looking at some of the plans, that's going to be basically the same dimensions of whatever new course gets put in there. And Pimlico Pimlico used to run a summer meet. Then they stopped for a while in the early 2000s and picked it up a few years ago. And that was key because that running at Pimlico for a little bit in the summer gave the Laurel turf course a break. Now, I just don't see how Pimlico, once it gets up and running as the last track standing on the Maryland circuit, I don't see how that turf course is going to handle a summer's worth of racing and then bookend it with the spring and the summer. I mean, the turf course at Colonial, it's 180 feet wide. It's renowned as one of the better turf courses in the country. And it's also that 180 number. It's exactly 180 miles south of Pimlico. I think there has to be some sort of schedule or some symmetry or a circuit worked out here. And one further point before I let Randy have a say is last December, I covered the University of Arizona Symposium of Racing, and this was one of the topics that came up about racetracks closing and consolidating. And I went back and I looked up today a comment from Chris McAlern, who's the vice president of racing at Penn Entertainment, which owns Penn National. And he was very forthright at that symposium last year when he brought up the comment that said, in the Mid-Atlantic, we have all these tracks running. Every year we say, why don't we form a circuit? And it never gets done. And his exact quote was, we are our own worst enemies in that respect.
Yeah, I'll make a prediction. I think within the next 5 years and maybe sooner, it will get done out of necessity. These tracks can't survive long term in a situation like this. This has been going on at least for 40 years. I mean, I've been hearing about this, about all the competition, overlapping dates and all that in the Northeast for so long. But there were enough horses to go around back then. You had the problem of cannibalizing bettors and things like that. And then simulcasting, full card simulcasting came along, and that seemed to help a little bit as well. But now as Bill pointed out, there are not enough horses to go around, and they can't keep going down this road. So we're either going to see a situation where racetracks are going to have to close, or else they're going to have to come together and form these circuits. And I think a key point you mentioned, Bill, is the shipping. I don't know why these tracks can't get together and each, put up money and have free shipping, free vanning going on from track to track to track, whichever track is running at the time. And maybe it's a situation where you can have one track running in the day and another track running at night, and no competition during the day or night for those particular racetracks. But it has to get done, or else you're going to see a lot of blood on the floor.
Randy, my take would be it'll never happen because it makes too much sense. And generally, things in racing that are like that. Oh, I shouldn't be a wise guy, but I think you're right out of necessity. And I think it would be Maryland that would be the first one to blink and cut back on their racing schedule. But it's no fun betting on 3-horse races. The public obviously hates that, and we definitely do need to fix that. And once again, Colonial opens on July 11th for a 27-day meet. Very excited. They're getting Michael Stidham, Mark Cassius stalls there, Christophe Clement, Cherie DeVoe. That's really a meet that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's got very good purses and very good racing. So, and speaking of that, I want to talk to you about the XBTV workout of the week. This week it is Sierra Leone, who we talked about earlier on the show, who worked 4 furlongs in 49.66 at Saratoga on Sunday. And he looks like he's working in that new cage bit that Chad Brown added for the Belmont Stakes. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
And also the TDN Writers Room is brought to you by our friends at West Point Thoroughbreds, which had a weekend to remember. Again, stakes wins from Vava, who we talked about earlier as the fastest horse of the week, and Carson's Run. Remember him. Vava continued to make that case I was telling you about as one of the leaders in the filly and mare sprint division. She was 1-2 in the Chicago Stakes at Churchill. Next up for Vava on her dance card is the Grade 1 Ballerina Stakes at Saratoga, also at 7 furlongs. Carson's Run, a Grade 1 winner as a 2-year-old last fall, returned to his best form in the Tail of the Cat Stakes on Sunday at Monmouth Park for his trainer, Christophe Clement. West Point carries now 8 wins at Churchill Downs into the final week of that spring-summer meeting. And West Point is now training its sites, of course, on Saratoga and Del Mar. To learn more, visit westpointtb.com.
That's a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my partners, Randy Moss and TD Thornton. Zoe Cadman will be back with us next week. Also want to thank our Green Group Guest of the Week, Flavien Prat, and the people who work so hard for us behind the scenes to put this show together. Our producing team with Katie Petruniak, Anthony LaRocca, and Aaliyah LaRocca. Once again, that's it for this edition of the Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room podcast. Thanks for tuning us in. We'll see you next week.